Here is why I absolutely love previewing the question. Is it talking about contributing to society? Oh yes, it says a useful member of society.
Just to recap, just a few challenges that we experienced here. Longer sentences, and what you want to do there is you want to do syntactic analysis.
Question 30 and 31, they go together, and when we answer questions like these, I always ask my students to make a little list. 1, 2, and 3. We're going to make a list of 3 things that we need to find in the quotes that must be present in the quote. Either there are physically present as like words, or maybe they're present as context or pronouns. Wright suggests that the likely quality of a person who contributes meaningfully to society is the... Okay, so what are the 3 things that must be present in the quote? Key quality of a person who contributes meaningfully to society. So should we have some kind of a mention of a person? Of course. Should we have some kind of a mention of a quality? And we should also have a mention of a contributing to society. Contribute to society. I definitely don't want you to do this while you're on the test, but while you're training for the test, I want you to be making those lists, because then you can just run the test on these quotes, and then you can look at quote of 19 to 22 and see if it has any of the 3 or all of the 3. If it has all of the 3 elements, then that means this could be a good candidate to be an answer choice. So let's check. 19 to 22. With such in contact. Okay. With such an interpretation, a patriot is a useful member of society, capable of enlarging all minds and bettering all hearts with which he comes in contact. I think this checks all of our boxes. Does it mention a person? Oh yes, it does. A patriot is a person. Does it mention a quality? It does. It says it's capable of enlarging all minds and bettering all hearts, which he comes into contact. Is it talking about contributing to society? Oh yes, it says a useful member of society. So it actually checks all of our boxes. So A is a really, really good candidate. Now let's see if anything that is pronounced in answer choice A actually matches to anything that is in question 30. A skill to recognize the wishes and needs of his and her fellow students. Not students, citizens. Skill to recognize the wishes and needs of his or her fellow citizens. Well, I can already tell that this is a trappy answer choice, because we have this supported by the passage. We have it say right here, a preference for the interests of many to those of the few, but this is not mapping to this line reference. So probably not. Ability to produce good for consumption by other people. Ability to produce goods for consumption by other people. To me, this sounds like a trappy answer choice. True in the real world, not supported by the passage. So probably not, and I don't remember anything about producing goods. Power to exert a positive influence on the thoughts and feelings of other people. Well, I think this is a perfect match, because it says capable of enlarging all minds and bettering all hearts with which he comes in contact. I think this is a direct restatement. Power to exert positive influence on the thoughts and feelings of other people. I like it. A capacity to influence other people to adopt his or her way of thinking. Well, now it's a competition between C and D. Which one is 100% correct and which one is 100% wrong? Let's see. The line reference says capable of enlarging all minds and bettering all hearts, in which he comes into context. Does it say that the capacity to influence other people to adopt his or her way of thinking? That to me sounds like manipulation rather than positive influence. Power to exert a positive influence on thoughts and feelings of other people. That is an exact match to A. Just for the sake of time, I'm not currently checking B, C, and D, but as a trained test taker, I absolutely would have done this. So just a note for you guys, we want to be verifying every single answer choice. We don't want it to be, oh, A kind of matches with D. Make sure that also answers the question and you checked all of the line references. And if you run them through the test, if you have more than 2 that match, go back to square one. Go back and reread the question. That means you're missing something. Okay? Next question. The third paragraph of passage 1, lines 30 to 36, right here, primarily serves to explain why. So the function. All right. I remember what happened here pretty well. To explain why narrow definitions of patriotism are inappropriate for America. I think this is a home run right here. Patriotism in exclusive meaning is surely not made for America. Mischievous everywhere. If it were both mischievous and absurd, the very origin of people is opposed to it. Narrow definition means that exclusive definition of patriotism, where if you are a patriot means you love your own country. So that's a narrow definition of patriotism, which I think is the right answer here. C, people of diverse backgrounds immigrated to America. Well, no, that is definitely mentioned here, but that is not the main function. Here's how I know. It only is mentioned once. Whenever we have a video where I talk about primary, central ideas, if it says primary or central, that means it has to be mentioned at least 2 times. That's how the SAT can establish that something is primary. I'll link that video up above as well. American institutions are unconcerned with patriotism. Well, another one. Sounds true in the real world. Not supported by the passage. Citizens of other nations are more patriotic than Americans. No, definitely not supported by this. This is actually the opposite of what this paragraph is saying. This is saying that Americans are the only nation where patriotism in its enlarged sense is possible to grow and foster. So we have just gone through the first passage. At this point, we are about to move on to passage number 2, and I'm going to read the blurb. I'm going to preview the questions for passage number 2, and then we'll go ahead and answer them. So passage 2 is adapted from an address to the American Legion Convention delivered by Mr. Stevenson in 1952. So this is a lot more recent. How many questions do we have that are specifically just for passage 2? Which choice from passage 2 provides the best evidence that Stevenson believes that patriotism can be misused? Here is why I absolutely love previewing the questions. Guess what? Without even reading the passage, I just learned that Stevenson is going to tell us that patriotism can be misused. I think that's incredibly valuable. So when I see him saying that, I'm going to slow down and I will remember that I have a question about this. In their speeches, both Wright and Stevenson, so this is about both of them, Wright and Stevenson most likely would agree, audience and both Wright and Stevenson most likely would agree that the most important aspect of patriotism is... Okay, so sadly we have this whole large paragraph, this whole large passage, and only one specific question about it, but we can deal with it. True patriotism, it seems to me, is based on tolerance and a large measure of humility. Okay, so true patriotism is based on tolerance and humility. There are men among us who use patriotism as a club for attacking other Americans. Remember, we had a question about misusing patriotism. I think it starts right here. What can we say for the self-styled patriot who thinks that a Negro, a Jew, a Catholic, or a Japanese American is less an American than he? And any type of rhetorical question, I want you to immediately think that the answer to a rhetorical question would be very obvious or very broad, and it's just like a big generalization. Like, who is this guy? Who does he think of himself to call like a Jew or Catholic or Japanese American less American than he? So he's definitely condemning. To condemn means to publicly denounce. Important vocabulary word. So he's definitely condemning such behavior. That betrays the deepest article of our faith, the belief in individual liberty and equality, which has always been the heart and soul of the American idea. That betrays. The word that is another pronoun that we have to make sure we understand. That means calling someone less of an American than you are, betrays the deepest article of our faith, the belief in individual liberty and equality. So actually, I think I'm almost ready to answer the question 33. Which choice from the passage provides the best evidence that Stevenson believes that patriotism can be misused? This is not the first line about humility. There's nothing here about being misused, so that's a no. 42 to 43, there are Americans. There are those among us who use patriotism as a club for attacking other Americans. Possibly. That betrays the idea. That betrays the deepest article. So that's his judgment about this. This is not evidence. Evidence means demonstration. And then the anatomy is complex. No, that's already further, so it has to be B right there. All right, now we'll continue reading and we'll continue answering in regards to both passages. The anatomy of patriotism is complex. Do you notice how much shorter the sentences are compared to the first passage? The first passage was in 1828 and the second one's 1952. I wonder what passages would be like in 2052. Maybe there will be like 4 sentences of every sentence would be like 4 words. But surely intolerance and public irresponsibility cannot be cloaked in a shining armor of rectitude and righteousness. Okay, a couple of vocabulary words here. Cloaked means it's like a veil, something that a vampire would wear. So surely intolerance and public irresponsibility could not be clothed in the shining armor of rectitude and righteousness. Rectitude and righteousness are synonyms. To rectify means to make something right. Nor can the denial of the right to hold ideas that are different, the freedom of man to think as he pleases. So these 2 sentences are actually combined together. Surely intolerance and public responsibility cannot be cloaked in shining armor, nor can the denial of right to hold ideas are different. The freedom of man to think as he pleases. To strike the freedom of the mind with the fist of a patriotism is an old and ugly subtlety. So he's basically condemning those who use patriotism in a exclusive, limited sense. Men who have offered their lives for their country know that patriotism is not the fear of something, semicolon, another $100 idea. It is the love of something. It here maps back to, I hope you said patriotism. You're absolutely right. So patriotism is not the fear of something. Patriotism is the love of something. Patriotism with us is not the hatred of Russia, semicolon, another sentence. Patriotism is the love of this republic, of the ideal of liberty of man and mind in which it was born, and to which this republic is dedicated. So he is saying what patriotism is. Here he was condemning, here he is explaining what patriotism really is. With this patriotism, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to skip through my comma sandwich. I'm going to read for the rest of the sentence, and I'm going to come back to my comma sandwich. This is not a comma sandwich. What do I say? This is a dash sandwich. Sorry. With this patriotism, America can master its power and turn it to the noble cause of peace. Patriotism in its large and wholesome meaning. With this patriotism, America can master its power and turn it to the noble cause of peace. We can maintain military power without militarism, semicolon, another idea. Political power without oppression, another idea. Moral power without compulsion and complacency. 2 big vocabulary words. I'm going to cover complacency now. I want you to look up compulsion. Complacency means you are happy with the way things are even though the state of things is really not as good. So you're just like going with the flow. We can maintain power, political power without oppression, and moral power without complacency. Okay, in their speeches, both Wright and Stevenson are primarily concerned with, let's start with the appropriateness of statues and other honors. Well, we do remember that Mr. Wright was talking about laurels and statues, but it was only mentioned once. So if something is mentioned once and it's not mentioned in the other passage, that's going to be a no. Political intrigue in continental Europe. Well, we had a lot of times Mr. Wright say the word continental Europe. I don't think that it has even been mentioned once here, so that's just no, and plus the word intrigue makes this answer choice wrong. The history of American patriotism, well, maybe, and true meaning of patriotism. Okay, one of those answer choices is 100% correct. One of them is 100% wrong. One word can make the answer choice wrong. What do you think it is? Is this passage only concerned with American patriotism? Or is it talking about patriotism in other countries? It is talking about patriotism in other countries as well. So the history of American patriotism would be too narrow, therefore that's a wrong answer choice. The true meaning of patriotism.
Question 35. Wright and Stevenson most likely would agree with which statement? Start at D. Too much attention to individual achievement is harmful to patriotism. Again, Wright is definitely talking about it. This is the place about laurels. Laurels and statues are vain things and mischievous as they're childish. And could we imagine giving them to a patriot? Like, that is just very detrimental. But both of them don't talk about it, individual achievement, so that is a no. Selfish patriotism is especially inappropriate in the United States. Well, we know that one of them has talked about it for sure. We remember the patriotism in exclusive meaning is surely not made for America. So Wright agrees. Do we have something that Stevenson says? Anatomy is complex. Men who offer their lives know that patriotism is not the fear of something, it is the love of something. Patriotism with us is not the hatred of Russia, it is the love of the Republic and the ideal of liberty of man and mind in which it was born, and to which this Republic is dedicated. With this patriotism, America can master its power and turn it to the noble cause of peace. We can maintain military power without militarism, without military action, political power without oppression, and moral power without compulsion and complacement. Selfish patriotism is especially inappropriate for the United States. I believe that we definitely have proof for both. But let's check other answer choices. United States has undergone several crises of patriotism. Yes, they both say that the anatomy of patriotism is complex, but crises would be that word that makes that answer choice absolutely wrong. Too extreme. Patriotism is stronger in the United States than it is in Europe. No. For a weak reader, this might have been an impression that both of them agree with. No. C is going to be the right answer. 36. Who is the most likely audience for both speeches? Okay. What is the tone? The tone is they're not trying to convince, they're just talking. So people throughout the world who have been accused for lacking patriotism, probably not. They're not saying that, oh, you should be more patriotic. There's no convincing going on. Europeans who have adapted a new type of patriotism, no. When he's referring to this here, that means we're referring to Americans. So those people have to be American. American leaders who wish to increase patriotism, I'm going to cancel that for the same reason I'm canceling D, is because there is no training involved. They're not telling them, like, this is how you increase your patriotism. They're just having a discussion, just a conversation. American citizens who are concerned about patriotism, I think that would be the best answer choice. Most neutral. 37. Wright and Stevenson most likely would agree that the most important aspect of patriotism is... Okay. Let's just check answer choices. Support for one's national leaders. Absolutely not. True in the real world, not supported by the passage. Suspicion of one's enemies. Again, if you're playing a lot of Minecraft, then yes, but nothing in both of these passages agree with that. A reverence for heroes. By the way, reverence means respect. To revere means to respect. A reverence for heroes, not really mentioned. So it's tolerance of difference. Let me just find where Stevens is talking about tolerance of difference. It says here, the anatomy of patriotism is complex, but surely intolerance and public irresponsibility could not be clothed or covered in shining armor of rectitude and righteousness, nor can the denial of right to hold ideas can be clothed in shining armor. The freedom of a man to think as he pleases. So definitely Stevens is for tolerance of difference. How about Stevenson, not Stevens? And how about Wright? I think he mentions here human liberty, the lover of human liberty. A patriot is employed to signify a lover of human liberty and human improvement, and they both talk about liberty. So in a smaller sense, Wright is talking about tolerance of difference, but that's the only one that they have an overlap in. So that's it. Let's check our answers. Let's see. Answer choice. So that should be A, B, C, A, D, B, A, C, A, and D. Just to recap, just a few challenges that we experienced here. Longer sentences, and what you want to do there is you want to do syntactic analysis. You want to analyze the syntax, identify what are my $100 ideas, what are my $50 ideas. There's a semicolon, there's going to be another thought, independent idea. You want to compress them to just its essential meaning. Another thing you noticed probably was how I was constantly mapping my pronouns. My pronouns needed to refer to something earlier in the passage, earlier in the sentences. When it says, this is inappropriate, what does he say when he says this? Am I understanding? So I want you to constantly be checking in with yourself. And then you also saw how I approach reading the answers and the questions. So I only answer the questions that are pertaining to this passage. I only read those. And don't forget, every month we choose one lucky person to get on a free tutoring session with me. So if you leave this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment, you will be entered into the drawer to get into a 1-hour free session with me where we can talk about SAT reading, SAT grammar, ACT, any type of learning related issue. So I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.